inviting me here today, and Jim, always good to see you again, and I acknowledge Dan David and Craig from our GCS, the Territory Home Team. And also, it's a bit like Home School Week for me. There's so many people in this room that I've had either worked with or had dealings with over many, many years, so it's terrific to see people again. And ironically, I'm going to try and be as brief as I know how to be, because I reckon the conversation's the best bit about these events. Sorry about that. But ironically, sorry John, you talked about the stability of the German system over 700 years, and I'm actually going to come up here and give you why we should reform the Australian apprenticeship system. And I have probably a pretty simple premise for actually putting some propositions out there, is that, and in a way it actually does fit into very much what John was saying, in the sense that we have been tinkering with our apprenticeship system and implementing for years. And I actually think that we're not really sure what our system is. I think that there is a lack of clarity about our system and what it could be and what it should be and for whom. And so I just want to sort of throw some things out there. And just a little bit of one-upmanship. I was also in Germany last year. I went over to Oxford, which was terrific. And I went to the OECD Apprenticeship Conference, and I actually did the presentation on behalf of Australia. And I got a tour through the Porsche factory, and that was just sensational. And they give really good gifts too. Anyway, so I'm going to start off all these tweets with just an economic context and just some data, because I actually think you need to ground every one of these conversations in the concept of, or in the background context of the economy and business. That PMI is the Performance of Manufacturing Index. That was released, the latest figure on that was released yesterday. AI Group does it, it's an internationally linked indices. And I'm not going to go through any of it, except to tell you that yesterday it actually slightly moved back up again. It's done monthly. It's not in the positive zone yet, but it's in the 49 point something or other, so it's nudging there. And you know, you don't have to be have too much of a long memory to see the GFC where it just sort of drops off. And then if I show you the same slide again, we do all of these indices, so it's the manufacturing, services and construction are the three indices there. They more or less tell you the same story, and you would expect that to be the case. I mean, we have been a sort of a multi-speed economy, and you can see variations in that, but the fundamental sort of drift is similar. But you can actually see from that sort of grey squiggly line, that's how technical I ever get is construction. You can see how devastated that was even after the GFC. It took ages to recover, and I know it spiked up for a while, but that was government stimulus that spiked it up. It's as simple as that. But construction is actually the only one of the three indices in positive territory as we speak. The other two indices are released later this week. That's why I only had the PMI slide first of all. I know you all know the NCVR stats backwards. It's your business. I don't need to sort of tell you anything about them, except that I think that this is actually it's a really interesting story in lots of ways, because it shows you the link between, it normally would show you the link between the economy or the business environment and apprenticeships in Australia, and it actually does do that, but it actually shows you the power of policy interventions as well. And so when the GFC happened, you don't get the big fall off the cliff that you get in our performance indices. You get some downward trends, and you can get other charts that will actually show it more starkly than this. But it actually is quite a testament to the fact that those kickstart incentives actually did put the floor in. That was a pretty rapid policy intervention that worked at the time. And without telling you, the top line is the traineeship or non-trades, as some people prefer to call them. And I don't need to tell you about when the existing was announced the existing worker incentives are going to come off, so you get the big spike up, everyone raced into the space, and then you can see the cliff. So that wasn't a GFC cliff, that was a policy shift. It's as simple as that. So we are in the apprenticeship environment. I'm going to use that as the term catch-all for all. It's actually very policy-driven in this country. It is business-driven. And you know, in the context of the economy, but there's some huge policy drivers in the space as well. The figures that came out, the early trend estimates that came out last year, they both ticked back up again, and that surprised me. I actually rang NCVR to see what was going on. I didn't intuitively believe them, and they're only early trend estimates, they're not actual data, and you can actually see they're actually starting to come back off again. So I'll be interested to see where that actually lands. But the anecdotal stuff I'm hearing is not of great confidence and big volume increases. And in fact, in some areas where we've had mass closures, and so if you look at Newcastle, I say Newcastle because it's not in Victoria, there's decimation in numbers there this year. That's another chart that tells you the same thing, but it really tells you what's sort of all bouncing around. And you all get to see these stats, so I don't need to go through them. But really, take out those wild swings towards the end. It's actually been a reasonably flattish story, except that the commencements for apprenticeships pre-GST to post-GST, we still actually haven't quite recovered to the same level. But they've moved a bit, but they've actually trended off a bit. So we're still not at the pre-GFC levels that we used to be at. So I'll just go back a minute. So perhaps some of the things I want to just sort of talk about really quite briefly today is I actually think, and picking up on some of John's things, she gave me some wonderful introductions, thank you. I actually think that we've got a few challenges at the moment. I was speaking to an employer not long ago, the other week, and he was complaining to me in no uncertain terms that 20 people had visited his apprentice over the duration of that apprentice, and he was the employer, and there was 20 other people who had knocked on the door or visited with paperwork or whatnot. And you know, you hear these stories, and it's not hard to sort of work out why employers are confused about who's who and which piece of paperwork is related to what. But also they actually start fundamentally questioning, well, what's the value of all of this stuff? And so if I have a criticism of our apprenticeship system, let's say at the moment, is that I actually think we've let it become really crowded and confused. And I think we've lost our original purpose. So it is sort of a first principles type comment. And if I try to quite crudely draw the current apprenticeship system at the moment, and this is incredibly simplified, so don't take anything beyond that. And of course I have put the GTO in the space, and I fully realise that most apprentices don't go through group training, but this is a GTO event, and so it is there. And basically, I would describe our current apprenticeship system as fairly largely RTO driven. And the reason I say that is the RTO might not put the apprentice on, but the actual demand aggregates on the supply side of the equation. And that's because that's where you either form class groups or not, and the like. And I think that is actually a significant problem. I totally get where the RTO is coming from, and having worked in an RTO, I don't consider myself blind to how RTOs operate or how they are required to operate and how they're funded. But if that is the point where you actually aggregate demand, then we have a supply side driven apprenticeship system in one here. Then you have a number of things circling around that: the apprentice, the employer, apprenticeship centres, mentors, all sorts of other things. And I think every single person in that equation is in the space for a whole lot of good reasons, but they are actually all tipping over people. And if you actually stand back and look at what the employer and the apprentice are on about, it's not necessarily clear to them. I also think we then confuse our apprenticeship system because we have this splendid federated model in the country. So we have 8 different apprenticeship systems. We have 8 different sets of administrative arrangements and regulatory arrangements, and so it goes on. And I don't care which regulator or which state training authority says to me that it's all national or we have model provisions or not. It is just patently not true, and they are incredibly different, and they are duplicative and unproductive. And you should spend more than 10 minutes at Albury or Wodonga, and that just hits you in spades between the eyes, and frustration employers experience up there trying to basically deal with one apprentice back in a dual context. And I really think it's time as a country where we actually started considering a more national approach to all of these issues, plus other issues, and the competition for trade skills is actually international, it's not with each other. Just a few other things that I think are sort of headwinds in the same space is competency-based progression and completion is now on modern awards, or most of them I should say, correct myself quickly. That will work swimmingly well in some places and be hugely problematic in other areas. the AI group is doing a very large project on that in engineering, and I with 10 providers, and some of them are fabulous with it, some are tackling it, tricky but tackling it, others are drowning. And so, they're supported environments. So you go to an unsupported environment and it just falls off pretty quickly. There are many more things in the Fair Work Commission that are in hearings at the moment. They might sound small issues, but they have the potential to be very significant impact on how apprenticeships play and roll out and who makes what decision. But going on to the Richards review that John was talking about, which I think is a document well and truly worth reading, is, to me, if I took one thing out of reading that report, apart from knowing to get liked, is that we need to refocus the apprenticeship system on the core relationship between their employer and the apprentice. That's the core relationship. It is all about the job. It is all about employment. You structure from that premise. And I think we've let that premise get clouded and confused in what we do. And that's not to say people are doing or choosing to do the wrong thing. We just let it get muddy. That may or may not deliver a bigger apprenticeship system. So we need to decide if we want a good apprenticeship system or we want a volume-based apprenticeship system. We get lost in that argument all the time. But I also think if employers in particular felt they were back in the driving seat in a more substantive way than they have been for the past 20 years, we would probably see increased engagement from employers. And I consistently hear employers saying too hard, too difficult, don't know what's going on. So I think we really do need to look at how we can re-empower that core relationship. This is also another fairly crude slide, but it really is saying to refocus it, you put the employer and the apprentice sort of as the purpose. GTO, not necessarily as it exists now, but as a demand-side platform, has the capacity to aggregate some demand and become the demand-based intermediary for a range of services and other provisions, including that of the RTO and other support services that exist now. I'm talking about this conceptually, not structurally, so please draw that distinction. But if you can actually drive demand-side solutions for the employers, by the employers on the demand side, we might actually free up some of this space far more effectively than is the case. So I'm just really quite happy to leave it at that as a challenge to put out there, some of the things that we need to think about and some of the things that we need to return to. Except to finally say that when I was at the World Skills Competition in Leipzig last year, in the past, Germany used to do pretty well getting all the medals. But the number one gold medal winning country was Korea, as in South Korea. I think the North Korean apprenticeship model might be slightly different. And Indonesia won its first ever gold medal. If Indonesia can do it, then it's all happening out there. So I'm happy to leave it at that. Thank you.